space chat a little bit. I wanted to give everyone a couple of minutes to hop on early and get everyone up to speed. So please, everyone, take your time, get online if you want to. If you want to check this whole thing out, I'm going to give everyone a minute or two. All right, let's see. Okay, we are still giving everyone a minute or two to log on. So, taking our time this morning with Space Chat. We're giving everyone some time. Excellent, excellent. All right. Okay. Still connecting, possibly. All right. Okay. So we are actually live now. Amazing. Thank you all for your patience and welcome to a brand new Space Chat. It might look a little different. I don't have my usual green screen with me that I've had for a little while, but we're actually changing things up. So welcome again. I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds or so to hop on. Thank you to all of you who are hopping on, who are joining us today on Space Chat. For those of you that haven't been here before, welcome. This is a unique weekly live series that, as you can see, is constantly changing and updating, as is the space industry. So, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So again, we're trying things a little bit differently, but that's how things go in space and science. You try things, they work. You try things, they don't. So, all right, people are starting to log on. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. Yes, it looks a little bit different behind me. Yes, I don't have my green screen today. We're going to have a little bit of fun, change things up, and we're going to have a lot of fun today answering a ton of questions and getting into the insanity that has been space recently. Okay, so now that people are successfully logged on, okay, it is exactly 1 now, which is the time that Space Chat usually goes live. So again, going to give everyone a minute or two. I hope that everyone is doing well. I'm curious to see who of you has been keeping up with the insanity in space and all of that craziness, especially this past week. So we're going to have a lot to talk about today. Get your questions ready. I cannot wait to answer them. All right, so now since we have some people here, I'm going to finally stop talking about random stuff, and I'm finally going to get going. Welcome, everyone, to Space Chat. This is the weekly show where, if you've been here before, I take a deep dive and look at Earth, the universe, and beyond. But if you've noticed, bit of a different setup. So we are actually changing things up a bit. So today on Space Chat, I will be talking all about what's new in space, what's happening right now in space, and as always, answering as many of your questions as I possibly can live. So without further ado, what's new in space? Let's get to it. So if you've been paying attention to space this past week, you may have noticed that billionaires are racing each other to space. The Pentagon has released its UFO report, and so much more has happened. Yesterday, as I mentioned, the spaceflight world was rocked when Virgin Galactic announced that it will fly its Unity 22 mission to space very soon with the company's founder, Sir Richard Branson, on board. In fact, the launch window for this mission begins on July 11th. Now, for those of you following spaceflight, you may have looked at July 11th and thought, that's interesting, because that is almost 2 weeks before Blue Origin's New Shepard crewed mission is set to launch. So if all goes according to plan for Virgin Galactic, this would put Virgin Galactic in space ahead of Blue Origin, just by a hair. And since Blue Origin's mission is set to loft Jeff Bezos to space and back, this would put Branson in space before Bezos. So is this intentional? I'm curious what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Now, the mission will see the company's VSS Unity spaceplane carried up by a mothership before dropping and rocketing just past the boundary of space. Not the Kármán mine, but a boundary of space. There are different definitions depending on who you talk to, and then back down to Earth. A short trip that will all happen within a single afternoon, similar to New Shepard. They won't be going to the exact same altitude, but it will still be a short flight up and a short flight back to landing. All right. Now, earlier yesterday, another major spaceflight announcement was made. Yes, even just the last day in space has been pretty crazy. Yesterday, Blue Origin's flight, which is scheduled for July 20th, again, very close to Virgin Galactic, which just announced July 11th, they'll have a very special passenger on board. Yesterday, Blue Origin announced that Wally Funk will fly aboard New Shepard to space. Now, if you don't know already, Funk is an absolute legend in aviation. 60 years ago, in 1961, she was a part of the group of women later dubbed the Mercury 13. You may have heard that term before. There have been documentaries, series, even on Netflix about the Mercury 13, which were a group, not necessarily an organized group, but a group of women who took part in medical and physical testing at the same time that NASA's Mercury 7 astronauts were training to space. They were doing the same physical, the same medical tests, sensory deprivation, all kinds of crazy medical and physical astronaut tests. Now, the women, as part of the Mercury 13, excelled at these tests, and Wally Funk, who's about to fly to space, was chief among them. She beat out the performance of not just her fellow pilots in the Mercury 13, but she also beat the scores of many of NASA's Mercury 7, scoring even much better than John Glenn on some tests. So with this flight, Funk, who will, since 1961, has been a champion aviator, flight instructor, goodwill ambassador, and so much more, will finally get to space after all these years. She will also break another record. She will break another one of John Glenn's records, actually, by becoming the oldest person in space at 82. So we're all very, very happy for Wally. We're all very, very excited. Awesome. Oh, wow. People are already asking some great questions. Amazing. Just take a quick aside. Space chat is all about chatting, all about questions. So at any time during this video, you can pop your question into the comments below. And after I'm done my spiel telling you what's new in space, I will answer all of your questions. So thank you to those of you who are already doing so. So shifting gears a little bit, another thing that's happening in space, SpaceX has rolled out its Super Heavy rocket to the launch pad to do some testing. Also, researchers are currently exploring using rockets to harvest water ice from the moon. Additionally, a collective was successful with their open letter to a scientific journal, and scientific journals are slowly changing out-of-date name change policies that have put trans authors in dangerous circumstances previously. Now, this past week has not just been a big week for space flight and science, it's also been a big week for those interested in UFOs, unidentified flying objects, or as some call them, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, for those of you that may have been following Space Chat or space news in general over here at space.com, the other week I spoke about an investigation by the Pentagon into UFOs. Now, a few years ago, footage resurfaced from the U.S. Navy that pilots had taken of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now, the Pentagon was urged more recently to investigate these sightings. What are they? Are they spy planes? Are they something even weirder? And they did. Just this past week, the Pentagon finally, after about 6 months of an investigation, released their report detailing their investigation into what these strange sights could have been. Now, in a result that is as intriguing as it may have been disappointing to some, the report didn't mention aliens explicitly as an explanation for the sightings. However, as many have noticed, it also did not rule them out. And when I'm talking about aliens, I'm talking about intelligent extraterrestrial life, not microbes, something far wilder. And so in the report, what it said, one quote from the report is, "The limited amount of high-quality reporting on unidentified aerial phenomena hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of UAP." Now, UFO, obviously isn't always used because there's some baggage, with it. But again, they said there really isn't enough for us to say exactly what this is. And so many people are disappointed because they're like, oh, well, this report just tells us we still have no idea what this is. But others are excited to learn, oh, they're not completely ruling out extraterrestrial life or other possible stranger solutions explicitly. They're saying that we still don't know. So it's very interesting, but not surprisingly inconclusive. Also recently, scientists found a new mega comet that they think might be the largest we've ever seen. Additionally, scientists recently discovered the densest white dwarf ever spotted that has the sun's mass in a body the size of the moon. So take all of the sun's enormous mass, all of that matter, and compact it into an object the size of the moon, much smaller. So it is extremely, extremely dense. Now, additionally, one other study that I think is really cool, so I wrote about it, really cool, really exciting. Scientists studying supermassive black holes found that on the far-reaching edges of the swirling disks of dust and gas, also known as accretion disks, which surround supermassive black holes, you may have seen it in photos, or not photos, but visualizations over the years, these huge disks surrounding black holes. They found that at the outer edges of these disks, just beyond the point where the black hole's gravitational reach pulls in, so just out of gravitational reach of the black hole, there could be tsunamis. Now, not the tsunamis that you might be thinking here on Earth, but gas tsunamis. Tsunamis made up of the gas and dust and material that is in that disk that, when closer to the black hole, is pulled in and feeds the black hole. But far out, it forms these massive, light years tall walls of gas and dust that are being described as tsunami-like. I don't know about you, but I would not like to be in the path of one of them. Goodness gracious. Woo. Had to take a sip of water. That was a lot of space and science, news, and information. So that's a little bit about what this week has been like in space. Crazy. In a word, it's been totally wild in space. So now is my favorite part of Space Chat, is the chatting part. So every episode of Space Chat, I always turn it over to you guys to answer your questions. So if you haven't had an opportunity yet to ask a question, now is the time. Drop it into the comments below, and I will get through as many as we can with the time that I have. Thank you to those of you I see already dropping questions down below. And again, don't be shy, ask any question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I'm really curious what you think, and I'm curious what you're curious about. So I'm gonna direct my gaze over here, and I'm gonna start. Okay, Gary on Facebook asks, did SpaceX truly hamper with any other space launches? No, there has been, some issues between SpaceX and the FAA, kind of back and forth. That is up in the air at the moment. They're kind of working out regulations, airspace, etc. What I believe you may be referring to is there was recently a planned SpaceX launch that unfortunately had to be scrubbed or canceled at the last minute. And that was because there was a wayward plane. There were other reasons as well, weather, etc. But it came within the airspace. So when there's a rocket launch, they don't just secure the exact area that the rocket launches, they secure a giant area around that rocket, not just on the ground, but also in the air, because they don't want any chance of the rocket somehow colliding with or interacting with physically in any way with any plane, object, person, anything whatsoever. And so that happened recently, but it was not hampering with any other launches. There was no, sabotage, nothing intentional or negative, but very interesting question. All right, let's see. All right, Sarav asks, are we alone in the universe? So this is an interesting question, and it really, at this point, is up to opinion. We have not discovered yet any life beyond Earth. Currently, actually, this past February, NASA launched its Perseverance rover to Mars with the explicit intention of that rover collecting samples that they hope will provide enough evidence for us to say that there at some point may have been life, likely microscopic, ancient microscopic life on Mars. And if that happens, if we get that confirmation, then we will know that there has at some point at least been life out in the universe beyond Earth. So aside from that, it is a personal opinion question because we don't have that data yet, because we haven't had any confirmation of life beyond Earth. In my opinion, I do think that it's statistically more probable that there is some type of life out in the universe beyond Earth. It seems less likely that we are the only living creatures living by a number of definitions out in the universe at all whatsoever, given how vast and incredible and varied the universe and its components are. But again, without that scientific confirmation, it is still a matter of opinion. Great question. All right, going back to my questions in the chat. All right, Jewel asks a similar question. Do you believe in UFOs? I feel like that kind of answered that. I feel like UFOs, I mean, the thing is, of course I believe in UFOs. I see things that I can't identify all the time. There are bugs I can't identify. There are things in the street that I can't identify. So when we're talking about unidentified flying objects, UFO does not mean alien. They don't equal each other. It just means that we don't know what it is yet. So what do I believe that there are things we don't understand? Absolutely. When it comes to do I believe that there's any alien life in the universe? I believe my previous answer kind of touched on that a little bit, but really interesting question. All right. All right, Daniel, hard question. What is your best guess for the first SpaceX Starship orbital flight? I cannot say with certainty when SpaceX's first successful, trip to space with Starship will be, crewed around the Earth, to the moon, who knows? So I really cannot say, and I would rather not speculate. No reason to rush space flight. It's difficult and it's dangerous. All right. Jewel asks another question. Could you describe Virgin Orbit? Okay. So I think you're asking about the new Virgin Galactic or Virgin Orbit launches. So Virgin Orbit, these are all companies within the Virgin group of companies that Richard Branson founded. Virgin Orbit recently launched some satellites to space, and Virgin Galactic is working on a crewed suborbital launch to the boundary of space by some standards, and then back to Earth, which they think might happen as soon as July 11th, which is really soon. So the two different companies do kind of different things, but they are both very active in space, especially right at this moment. All right. Wow, you guys are asking some really, really great questions. Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, Willie asks, will all of these satellites be bad if they were to collide and start a domino effect? So there has been for many years concern about satellites and other things in orbit colliding with one another for a number of reasons, right? Things colliding in orbit could be pushed, could fall. They could just fall into Earth's atmosphere and burn up, and there's no real issue there. But they could collide, break into more pieces, continue to produce more and more space junk by colliding, which as we launch more and more things to space in general and into orbit around Earth, the fear of collision is very real. Between defunct satellites and also active satellites, collision is a very real concern. I'm not sure what you mean by domino effect, but yes, it would definitely be bad if satellites collided, especially satellites that are active and operational, depending on who sent up each satellite. There could be a lot of issues started by that, especially if they were by two different people, providers, countries, etc. So yeah, it'd be bad. All right, let's see. Bill asks, are CubeSats in a low enough orbit that they'll burn up in a year or so? The amount of space junk has got to be enormous. Yes, so not all CubeSats are the same or sent by the same people or going to the same exact place in low Earth orbit. CubeSat is more an umbrella term to describe a type of satellite, a small cube-shaped satellite, often sending up small research payloads, sometimes student projects even. And it really depends. You know, when we look at Starlink, SpaceX Starlink satellites, for example, they are specifically designed to deorbit and burn up in the atmosphere after a certain amount of time, and can manually be moved to do so if that does not happen correctly. Now, that's not across the board for all satellites yet. So I really can't say for all CubeSats, but interesting question. All right, Frederick asked, is it possible to reach the Hubble telescope with today's shuttles? So unfortunately, the shuttle program did end in 2011, and NASA's shuttles were surfacing the Hubble Space Telescope. So Hubble has not been surfaced in a very long time, at least by astronauts in person. You may have heard another recent piece of space news, Hubble is on the fritz. Hubble has some pretty old computers on board. They're from the 80s, and they think it's possible that one of these older computers is having issues with a memory module in it. And so they can't surface it in person, not designed to do so at the moment, not set up to do so at the moment. So they're doing some remote operations to try to switch to backup hardware and do some other things to hopefully get Hubble back in shape. Okay, interesting question though. All right, I'm gonna answer one more question. Thank you all so much again. Jack asks on Facebook, do you think that if there are aliens, they will be carbon-based? I have no idea, Jack. If that's a terrible answer, I'm sorry. But again, all we know about life is what we've seen on Earth, right? So we know that life on Earth is carbon-based. We understand life on Earth pretty well, but we don't yet understand how life originated on Earth. So until we make that first discovery of life off of Earth and start studying what that might be like, we won't really know. And it's possible that life in our solar system or on certain planets in our solar system like Mars might be carbon-based, but in other solar systems, on other types of planets, there could be life that is so far different from what we know on Earth, that is so different that we might not even recognize it as life at first go. So it's a really challenging question, but no, not necessarily. So, oh man, I thought that was the last question, but people have so many great ones. Wow, holy cow. People on YouTube have some great questions as well. Okay, Mushy Magazine, on location on YouTube, I assume that's not your legal name, asks, is Hubble back online yet? And is James Webb Space Telescope going to launch yet? I have answers to both of those. So Hubble is not back online yet. They are currently, at least the latest that I heard, they are working to set up kind of backup hardware for Hubble to be able to switch to if need be. They're still working to figure out the root cause. They have some ideas, but they don't know 100% what line yet. We do not have a timeline, hopefully soon, but that's, again, just personal opinion. And James Webb Space Telescope launch date, it was set for October, but now we believe it will more likely launch in this November. So James Webb, which some say is the follow-up to Hubble, and some say will work alongside Hubble since they do view things fairly differently, is set to launch pretty soon. But I have full faith that Hubble will make a valiant recovery. I hope you all feel the same. I love Hubble. I never want to stop seeing Hubble images. All right. Arjun asks, what's your favorite resource for staying up to date with space and rockets and stuff? That's a great question, Arjun. I'm glad you asked. My favorite resource is space.com. Now, of course, I'm biased. I work for space.com. I'm literally on space.com right now. But I mean, we really cover it all. And I hope that we continue to do so. So you can pretty much be sure if there's something happening in space, you can find it on our site. I won't always be on here all day, every day talking about it, but you will likely find some type of article or information about it on space.com. Okay. Andy asks, How long do you think before we go back to the moon? Well, NASA is hoping relatively soon with its Artemis program. I am cautiously optimistic that that is the case. I really do hope and think that within the next decade, we will return humans to the lunar surface. And NASA has made great progress and continues to push forward very intensely to make this happen. So fingers are absolutely crossed. Okay. Okay. Carl asks, how would the space station be decommissioned? Can Starship bring modules down on Earth? Thanks. So the space station would be decommissioned like other things in space. From what I understand, it would be broken apart, burned up in the atmosphere. Of course, they would have to do this in a specific way, so that just in case some parts survived, they would fall into the ocean. It would not make an uncontrolled re-entry, but a controlled re-entry. But again, who's to say? There are no explicit plans for the space station being decommissioned, so there are no plans to do so. All right, and can Starship bring modules down on Earth? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm sorry, I genuinely don't. I wish I could answer that question. And on that note, I'm going to leave it. Thank you all so much for joining me for Space Chat. Tune in again next Friday, and you'll learn all about what happens next week in space. What other crazy, nonsense, amazing things will happen in space. So thank you all so much for joining me. And throughout the week, if you ever have any space questions, go to anyofspace.com social media and feel free to ask them. And I might pop them into my questions on next week's Space Chat. Thank you all so much.